The news studio was alive with electricity, a rare mix of tension and anticipation that seemed to hum through the air. Cameras were trained on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who stood poised at the center of the broadcast set. Behind her, a massive LED screen flashed the headline in bold, unforgiving letters. Senator Kennedy files $80 million lawsuit against Crockett. The words seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud, promising conflict, drama, and high stakes. For a moment, the room fell silent, every journalist, producer, and cameraman holding their breath, aware that the next words would set the tone for a national conversation. Crockett's posture was impeccable, her navy blazer sharp against the gleaming studio floor. Her expression was calm, yet it radiated authority, a controlled energy that drew the eyes of everyone in the room. She wasn't just a congresswoman. She was a strategist, a lawyer, and a storyteller all in one. Her fingers rested lightly on a leather-bound folder, the promise of preparation and undeniable evidence. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the slight narrowing of her eyes as she scanned the studio, silently commanding attention. Across the network control room, producers whispered frantically, anticipating what could be the most defining political showdown of the year. Kennedy's lawsuit, a staggering $80 million claim, threatened not only Crockett's political standing, but sent ripples across the media landscape. Analysts debated the implications on live feeds, throwing around phrases like unprecedented, politically motivated, and frivolous claim. But Crockett's composure never wavered. She understood that this was more than legal maneuvering. It was a test of nerve, strategy, and the ability to communicate truth under pressure. Finally, she spoke, and her voice cut through the tension with a crystalline clarity that left no room for doubt. "I've faced numerous challenges in my career," she began, each word deliberate, measured. "But never have I encountered a claim so audacious, so detached from reality, and yet presented with such confidence. Today, I will show why these allegations are not just unfounded, they are fundamentally flawed." The camera lingered on her face as a flicker of resolve crossed her features. Reporters exchanged glances, social media feeds lit up instantly, and the audience at home leaned forward, sensing that they were about to witness not just a rebuttal, but a moment that could define Crockett's career. The energy in the room was palpable. It wasn't anger or fear that filled the space. It was a quiet, unstoppable force of preparation, intellect, and courage. Every eye, every lens, every microphone seemed drawn toward her, as if the air itself recognized the gravity of the moment. And in that tense silence, before a single counter-argument had been made, it was clear. Jasmine Crockett was not intimidated. She was ready. The morning light streamed through the studio windows, casting a sharp glow on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett as the full weight of the headline sank in. Senator Kennedy files $80 million lawsuit against Crockett. The number itself, $80 million, seemed almost surreal, a figure large enough to rattle the most seasoned political operative. Across the country, news outlets scrambled to cover the story, pundits rushed to dissect the implications, and social media exploded with speculation, memes, and hashtags, ranging from Crockett vs. Kennedy to 80 million stunned. But in the studio, Crockett stood as if untouched by the chaos. Calm, focused, and meticulously prepared, she had anticipated this moment. Every curveball, every exaggeration, every attempt at intimidation. Senator Kennedy's lawsuit was formidable in its scope. Allegations of defamation, financial harm, and a supposed conspiracy to manipulate public opinion formed the backbone of the complaint. Legal analysts on live feeds pored over the filing, highlighting what they called serious implications for Crockett's political credibility. Headlines screamed phrases like "bold claim against rising star" and "Crockett faces multi-million-dollar challenge." The lawsuit painted a picture of a congresswoman overstepping her bounds, attacking a seasoned senator's reputation, and allegedly causing tangible financial damages. For casual viewers, it sounded explosive, and for some, intimidating. Yet Crockett remained unmoved. Her posture was precise, her calm a deliberate signal of confidence. With a subtle motion, she opened the leather-bound folder resting on the desk before her. Inside were pages of meticulously organized evidence, charts, emails, and public statements, all countering the allegations point by point. "Let's be clear," she began, voice steady but commanding. "These claims are not merely unsubstantiated. They are entirely divorced from fact. Every assertion made against me has been cross-checked, verified, and contextualized. And today, we will see exactly why the truth cannot be silenced by threats of financial retribution." The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the faint glint in her eyes as she spoke. She exuded calm authority, the kind that only comes from preparation and conviction. Behind the scenes, producers whispered frantically, ensuring camera angles captured every deliberate gesture. The screen behind her now displayed side-by-side comparisons of Kennedy's public statements and the allegedly defamatory content. The contrast was stark. Kennedy's words, while politically charged, were often misrepresented or taken out of context in the complaint. Crockett's team had anticipated every point of attack, preparing rebuttals for both factual inaccuracies and emotional appeals. On live feeds, the legal pundits struggled to keep up. "This is unprecedented," one analyst muttered, his voice betraying both admiration and disbelief. "Rarely do you see a political figure so completely prepared for a multi-million-dollar lawsuit before it even reaches the courts." Another commentator added, "Crockett isn't just defending herself legally. She's reframing the narrative entirely. This is a masterclass in poise and strategy." Social media lit up as viewers shared clips, replaying her calm dismantling of Kennedy's claims. The tension was almost tangible. The air in the studio seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Each word she spoke slicing through the chaos of speculation and fear. Crockett's counter-narrative was not only factual, but strategically structured. She began with a meticulous timeline, showing the sequence of events leading up to the lawsuit. Emails, public records, and verified statements were presented as visual evidence on the studio's large screen. Each point was layered, demonstrating that Kennedy's allegations lacked both merit and context. "The narrative constructed in this lawsuit," she explained, voice steady and precise, "is an attempt to intimidate and silence. But the evidence tells a very different story. Every statement I made was factual, every claim supported, and every action transparent. This is not just my defense. This is a defense of truth itself." She then addressed the emotional dimension, subtly connecting the abstract legal battle to real Americans affected by political manipulation and misinformation. A photograph appeared on the screen. A young voter, misrepresented in one of Kennedy's campaigns, whose story Crockett had highlighted in prior public statements. "This is not about me," she said softly, allowing her tone to shift to empathy without losing authority. "It's about the citizens whose voices were mischaracterized, whose experiences were misrepresented. If this lawsuit succeeds, it threatens not just me. It threatens accountability itself." The room fell silent, the contrast between the massive financial claim and her calm, principled stance creating a palpable tension. Even Kennedy's top legal advisors appeared unsettled. Their carefully constructed complaint, designed to intimidate, was being methodically dismantled on live television. Every graph, every chart, every timeline Crockett presented directly contradicted the lawsuit's premise. Reporters in the studio whispered, noting the rare combination of legal skill, political acumen, and emotional resonance. Crockett's preparation wasn't just about winning the argument. It was about controlling the narrative. By the end of the segment, the energy in the studio had shifted. Where there had been tension and anticipation, there was now awe. Viewers at home were tweeting, sharing, and debating in real time. Analysts paused, commentators nodded, and the hashtag #CrockettStandStrong began trending. Crockett closed her folder with a deliberate motion, her eyes scanning the studio, calm and composed. She had survived the opening storm of allegations, and in doing so, she had set the stage for the confrontation to come. The moment was more than a legal rebuttal. It was a statement of authority, preparation, and resilience. For the first time, many Americans saw the full extent of Crockett's skill, her ability to anticipate, dismantle, and turn even the most intimidating challenges into opportunities to assert truth. The air was thick with tension, but now it was infused with respect. The legal and political world had been put on notice. Jasmine Crockett was ready to respond, not just with words but with facts, evidence, and an unshakable poise that could stun even the most formidable opponents. The studio was silent, every eye fixed on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The opening tension and allegations had been addressed, but now came the moment viewers had been waiting for, the counterstrike. Crockett's fingers rested lightly on her leather-bound folder, the evidence meticulously organized, the charts perfectly aligned. This was her moment, not just to defend herself, but to turn the tables entirely. Across the nation, viewers leaned forward in their living rooms, glued to the screens, anticipating the pivot that could redefine this entire confrontation. Crockett took a measured breath, her voice calm but sharp as she began. "Let's be clear about one thing," she said, her gaze unwavering. "The $80 million claim is not about truth, nor about legal principle. It is designed to intimidate, to silence voices that challenge power. But facts, backed by evidence, cannot be bought, threatened, or manipulated." She flipped open the folder with deliberate precision, revealing pages of emails, public statements, and verifiable records. Every document was a strategic strike, dismantling the narrative Kennedy had attempted to impose. The camera zoomed in on the folder, displaying side-by-side comparisons of Kennedy's alleged misrepresentations versus the factual timeline. Crockett narrated each discrepancy with authority, her tone calm yet undeniable. "Every statement I made was verified, every claim accurate, and every interpretation based on publicly available information," she continued. In contrast, the lawsuit misrepresents, distorts, and amplifies inconsistencies for effect. That is not law. That is intimidation. Across the studio, anchors and legal analysts watched in disbelief. Rarely had they seen someone methodically deconstruct an $80 million lawsuit in real time. On live television with such precision, Crockett didn't stop at facts. She connected her counterstrike to the human impact of misinformation and intimidation. On the screen behind her appeared a photograph. A young voter whose experience had been misrepresented in Kennedy's prior campaigns. "This isn't about me," Crockett said, her voice softening but firm, commanding empathy without sacrificing authority. "It's about the people whose voices were silenced, whose realities were twisted. If we allow intimidation through lawsuits, we erode the very foundation of accountability in our democracy." The audience, both in the studio and at home, felt the gravity of her words. Viewers flooded social media, sharing clips with captions like, "Crockett stands strong" and "Truth over fear." Then came the legal pivot, the moment that would stun even Kennedy's top advisors. Crockett presented a meticulously crafted timeline, tracing Kennedy's statements and public actions against the claims in his lawsuit. She demonstrated inconsistencies, contradictions, and selective omissions. "The evidence," she said, flipping through charts and emails, "shows a pattern. Assertions made in this lawsuit are contradicted by publicly verifiable records. This is not interpretation. This is fact. And facts cannot be refuted with threats of financial harm." Gasps rippled across the studio. Even seasoned commentators leaned forward, recognizing the genius in her approach, using evidence, structure, and calm authority to turn a personal legal attack into a strategic showcase of accountability. The tension escalated further as Crockett delivered the emotional core of her counterstrike. "This is about the people, not the politics," she continued, holding up a photograph of a voter who had faced intimidation in the past. Her voice carried both conviction and humanity. "When an individual's experience is manipulated to construct a narrative of guilt, we are not just attacking one person. We are attacking the principle of truth. My responsibility is to protect the people from such distortions, and today, that responsibility guides every word I speak." The studio was completely silent. Even the producers paused, realizing the magnitude of the moment. Crockett's final move in this segment was both cinematic and masterful. She displayed a side-by-side comparison of Kennedy's lawsuit claims and the verified evidence, clearly demonstrating how each allegation collapsed under scrutiny. "Every claim made against me," she said, her tone calm but commanding, "fails when tested against the facts. This is not a defense. This is a counterattack rooted in transparency, accountability, and truth. And on live television, the truth cannot be denied." The camera lingered on her face, capturing the calm intensity that had defined the entire segment. Across the nation, viewers shared every moment. Social media feeds flooded with praise, shock, and admiration. Legal analysts paused, stunned at the elegance of her dismantling of the case. Even Kennedy's legal team, watching live, shifted uncomfortably. Crockett had not merely defended herself, she had reframed the entire narrative. She had taken a lawsuit meant to intimidate and transformed it into a masterclass in strategic, evidence-based counterattack. As the segment ended, the tension in the studio had shifted. Where there had been anticipation and unease, there was now awe and respect. Crockett closed her folder with deliberate composure, her eyes scanning the studio, calm yet electrifying. The audience understood something critical. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a demonstration of courage, intellect, and preparation. The counterstrike was complete, leaving viewers, commentators, and even opponents stunned. Crockett's performance had achieved the impossible, turning the aggression of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit into a display of undeniable authority. The next segments would follow with analysis, public reaction, and the unfolding consequences. But Part 3 had set the tone. Jasmine Crockett was not merely defending herself. She was defining the battlefield. The cameras cut to the audience shots, a mix of live studio spectators, journalists, and TV viewers glued to screens nationwide. But behind the legal analysis and courtroom-like precision, there was a deeper story, one that transcended lawsuits and political theatrics. This was about people, real Americans, whose voices had been distorted, silenced, or dismissed. Crockett understood this profoundly, and it was the emotional core she was about to unleash. Holding a photograph in her hand, she paused, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle. The image showed a young voter, barely 18, waiting in line for hours at a polling station, only to be turned away due to bureaucratic error. Crockett's voice softened, yet remained steady and commanding. "This isn't about numbers or headlines or even $80 million, she said. It's about Americans whose rights are at stake. When political narratives overshadow human reality, we all lose. Today, I stand for those people, not for myself." The studio felt an electric shift. Journalists leaned forward, some scribbling notes feverishly, others pausing mid-sentence as they absorbed the power of her message. Social media erupted immediately. Clips of her statement shared millions of times within minutes. Hashtags like Sandra Crockett Stand Strong, Truth Over Money, and Defending the People began trending nationwide. Viewers tweeted messages of admiration and solidarity, emphasizing the emotional resonance Crockett had crafted alongside her legal precision. Crockett then transitioned seamlessly into evidence-backed narratives, intertwining human stories with factual timelines. She displayed sworn affidavits from citizens affected by misrepresentation in Kennedy's public campaigns. Each affidavit was a meticulous example of lived reality contradicting political claims. "These are not abstract arguments," she explained. "These are lives, families, students, voters, every person whose truth has been questioned. The lawsuit attempts to obscure these realities, but truth, documented and undeniable, cannot be silenced." The camera cut to Kennedy's legal team watching the broadcast in their offices. The confident smirks and assured postures they had worn just hours before were replaced by quiet tension. Crockett had shifted the battleground entirely. She wasn't merely defending against allegations. She was reframing the narrative, pulling the focus from abstract legal arguments to real-world consequences. Every chart, every affidavit, every carefully prepared photograph was a weapon, yet it was wielded with grace, not aggression. Across newsrooms, commentators scrambled to respond. "Rarely do you see a politician so masterfully combine legal defense with emotional storytelling," said one CNN analyst. "She's not just countering a lawsuit, she's creating a narrative that people will remember and rally behind." On MSNBC, a legal expert echoed the sentiment. "This is advocacy at its best. Crockett is showing that facts, empathy, and preparation together can not only defend a position, but redefine the conversation entirely." Meanwhile, Crockett focused back on her audience, her gaze steady and unflinching. She knew the stakes weren't just political. They were deeply human. She held up a photograph of an elderly voter, Mrs. Linda Harrison, who had been misrepresented in a prior campaign statement. The story was simple, but devastating. Mrs. Harrison had voted faithfully for decades, yet her voice had been distorted to support Kennedy's narrative. "Mrs. Harrison and millions like her don't care about legal jargon," Crockett said, her tone both compassionate and firm. "They care about being heard. They care about their rights. And that is what we must defend above all else." The emotional resonance of her words rippled through the studio and into homes across America. Viewers tweeted in real time, sharing personal stories, expressing gratitude, and praising Crockett's courage. Even moderate commentators, who often critiqued her policy positions, paused to note the combination of intellect, empathy, and poise she displayed. Crockett had done more than defend herself. She had created a movement of attention, respect, and accountability around the issue. By the end of Part 4, the story had taken on a life of its own. Crockett's words, images, and evidence had transformed a potential financial intimidation tactic into a viral masterclass of human-centered advocacy. The studio, once tense and uncertain, now hummed with admiration. Producers, anchors, and journalists alike recognized that they had just witnessed a rare combination of intellect, strategy, and emotional storytelling, all delivered flawlessly under pressure. Crockett closed her folder, letting the silence speak volumes. The emotional core had been conveyed. The human impact had been made undeniable. Across the country, viewers, voters, and even political adversaries were left stunned. The narrative had shifted. No longer was this just a lawsuit. It was a moment of truth, courage, and clarity. A defining chapter in the story of Jasmine Crockett's political and legal career. As the broadcast ended, the ripple effects of Jasmine Crockett's masterful counterstrike were immediate and undeniable. Across the nation, millions of viewers were glued to their screens, scrolling through social media, calling friends, and replaying the live segment. The hashtag #CrockettStandStrong surged to the top of Twitter trends within minutes. Analysts scrambled to quantify the viral reach. Within an hour, millions of shares, retweets, and posts amplified her message. Across platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even LinkedIn, Crockett's performance became the single most discussed topic of the day. Newsrooms across the country erupted. CNN interrupted regular programming to replay key moments of her live defense, with on-air hosts marveling at her poise and evidence-based dismantling of the $80 million lawsuit. Rarely have we seen such an extraordinary combination of preparation, intellect, and emotional resonance, one anchor noted. MSNBC hosted legal analysts who repeatedly emphasized the unprecedented nature of her live counterattack. Even conservative commentators, initially dismissive, found themselves pausing, begrudgingly acknowledging her effectiveness. The conversation had shifted. The narrative was no longer about the lawsuit itself, but about Crockett's remarkable command of the situation. Social media amplified the effect. Clips from the live segment went viral, trending across multiple platforms simultaneously. On TikTok, short 15-second compilations captured her calm dismantling of the allegations, earning millions of views within hours. Twitter users posted side-by-side comparisons of Kennedy's claims and Crockett's rebuttals, creating threads dissecting every point with precision. Instagram feeds featured her photographs holding affidavits, combined with captions emphasizing courage and truth. Hashtags like #Truth Over Fear and Defending the People became rallying cries for supporters nationwide. Political circles felt the tremors too. Congressional offices buzzed with phone calls, messages, and inquiries from both allies and opponents. Democratic colleagues expressed quiet admiration, praising her for transforming a potential political and financial threat into a showcase of intellect and resilience. Meanwhile, even Kennedy's camp appeared unsettled. Advisors privately admitted that Crockett's live, methodical dismantling of their claims had caught them off guard, forcing them to rethink strategy in real time. What had begun as a calculated legal intimidation had become a public relations disaster for the senator. In households across the country, viewers engaged in discussions far beyond the courtroom implications. Families debated the courage it took to face a multi-million-dollar lawsuit on live TV. Students studying law and political science dissected her argument structure, presentation style, and emotional resonance. College campuses witnessed impromptu discussions, with students marveling at how factual evidence, combined with empathy and calm authority, could turn the tide in such high-stakes situations. Media outlets rapidly produced in-depth analysis segments. Experts dissected her preparation, the precise organization of evidence, the use of affidavits to humanize the narrative, and the careful balance between factual rigor and emotional connection. Legal commentators compared her performance to historic moments in televised political confrontations, noting its unique combination of intellectual authority and public relatability. Across platforms, journalists highlighted her ability to seize control of the narrative, transforming a potential threat into a moment of triumph. Political pundits quickly realized the implications. Crockett had not only defended herself, she had redefined the conversation. The focus was no longer on the alleged lawsuit, but on her preparedness, intelligence, and ability to stand firm under pressure. Public perception had shifted dramatically, from potential vulnerability to unassailable authority. Social media sentiment analysis confirmed the trend, showing a massive surge of positive engagement. Millions of Americans were sharing, commenting, and posting in support, creating an echo chamber of admiration and awe. Even the Senator Kennedy camp found themselves on the defensive. Opinion pieces began appearing, highlighting the miscalculation of pursuing a high-profile lawsuit against a highly prepared opponent on live television. Media outlets questioned the wisdom of trying to intimidate an opponent who had clearly anticipated every allegation and meticulously prepared her response. Political analysts noted that in the age of instantaneous social media reaction, missteps in high-profile confrontations could not be contained, and Kennedy had inadvertently handed Crockett a platform to demonstrate brilliance on a national stage. By the end of the day, the public's reaction was clear. Jasmine Crockett had not only survived an $80 million threat, she had dominated the narrative. Her meticulous preparation, calm poise, and strategic brilliance had captivated millions, won admiration from allies and skeptics alike, and left a nation discussing the power of truth, courage, and accountability in public life. In every newsroom, every living room, and across every social media feed, one thing was undeniable. Crockett had turned a moment of potential vulnerability into a historic display of intellect, resilience, and leadership. By the following morning, the atmosphere in Senator Kennedy's offices was tense, bordering on chaotic. The live broadcast of Jasmine Crockett's counterstrike had circulated across every major network, social media feed, and news website. Advisors huddled around conference tables, laptops open, analytics streaming in real time. Each new clip of Crockett dismantling the $80 million lawsuit brought a fresh wave of scrutiny, ridicule, and strategic panic. Kennedy, usually confident and commanding, paced the room, hands clasped tightly behind his back. The $80 million lawsuit, designed to intimidate, now seemed to have backfired spectacularly. Crockett's methodical approach had reframed the narrative entirely. The senator was no longer the aggressor. He had become the target of public criticism, his credibility and strategy under question. "We underestimated her," one senior advisor admitted, voice low. "She anticipated every claim, every allegation, and turned it into a public showcase. This isn't just a legal problem, it's a PR disaster." The room fell silent. Kennedy's eyes narrowed, scanning the real-time social media metrics projected onto a screen. Millions of shares, trending hashtags, positive sentiment. The numbers were undeniable. Crockett had captivated the nation, and the senator's team had no immediate remedy. Kennedy's legal counsel convened an emergency session to discuss next steps. "We need to recalibrate," the lead attorney began, flipping through printed transcripts of the broadcast. "Any further legal action will be scrutinized even more heavily. Every statement she made is backed by documentation. Public perception is on her side, and any attempt to escalate could deepen the backlash." The room nodded grimly. They realized that Crockett's live defense had neutralized the intimidation factor entirely. The lawsuit, which once loomed like a hammer over her career, had transformed into a high-visibility failure. Meanwhile, political strategists emphasized the long-term implications. "This is more than a lawsuit," one advisor warned. This is narrative control. She's defined the story for the public, positioning herself as a fearless defender of accountability and truth. Any counter-move we make must consider that perception. One misstep, and we risk permanent damage. Kennedy, his usual calm demeanor replaced by sharp focus, absorbed every word. He understood the stakes. Crockett had turned a legal confrontation into a public triumph, and the optics alone were a political liability. The senator's team debated several legal options, from delaying tactics to settlement discussions, yet none seemed viable in the current media environment. Any attempt to dismiss or modify the lawsuit now risked appearing reactive, weak, or punitive. Crockett had not only anticipated each legal claim, she had anticipated the public's reaction, aligning her evidence with compelling human stories, affidavits, and verifiable documentation. The national conversation had shifted decisively in her favor. Even Kennedy's allies outside the office expressed unease. Columnists and commentators began publishing opinion pieces questioning the wisdom of pursuing such an aggressive strategy against a highly prepared and articulate opponent. Headlines highlighted Crockett's poise, factual precision, and emotional resonance, often noting the contrast between her calm authority and the senator's increasingly tense response. Across platforms, viewers debated her mastery, praising her ability to turn legal defense into a lesson in accountability and courage. Internally, Kennedy's team recognized another reality. Any new legal maneuver could now be weaponized against them. Crockett's meticulous documentation and viral reach meant that the public would scrutinize every move. Every court filing, press release, or rebuttal could be dissected, compared against her prior statements, and shared instantly across social media. The magnitude of the potential backlash made escalation a dangerous prospect. Amidst the chaos, Kennedy's advisors shifted focus toward damage control. "We need a response that acknowledges public perception without appearing reactive," one strategist said. "We must emphasize procedural correctness, legal obligations, and focus on facts, without entering a public battle she's already dominating." Another suggested a media statement highlighting the technical aspects of the lawsuit, avoiding the viral human stories Crockett had so effectively leveraged. Yet all agreed on one point: she had set the tone, and any counteraction would now be framed against her narrative. By mid-afternoon, Kennedy convened a private briefing with top aides and legal counsel. "She's not just smart," he admitted quietly. "She's prepared, strategic, and commanding. We have to recalibrate, or we risk losing more than this lawsuit. We've created a spectacle that we can't control." The room nodded in solemn agreement. They realized Crockett's mastery of narrative, evidence, and public perception had forced them onto the defensive. As Part 6 closes, the stage is set for the final acts of this confrontation. Kennedy's legal team scrambles to identify avenues that don't exacerbate public perception, while Crockett's command over both facts and narrative solidifies her position. What began as a lawsuit designed to intimidate has evolved into a showcase of strategy, preparation, and public influence. Crockett isn't just defending herself, she's defining the battlefield, leaving Kennedy reacting to a narrative she has fully controlled. The nation waited, breathless, as the fallout from Jasmine Crockett's live television confrontation with Senator Kennedy continued to unfold. News outlets replayed her statements in endless loops. Every network, every platform, dissected her performance with meticulous precision. Crockett had not only defended herself, she had transformed a legal challenge into a narrative triumph. Across the country, viewers, voters, and pundits alike were captivated by her combination of intellect, preparation, and unflinching poise. 3 days after the live broadcast, Kennedy's legal team finally released a public statement. It was carefully worded, attempting to reclaim some semblance of control. The statement emphasized procedural correctness, the importance of legal standards, and respect for the judicial process. Yet, the carefully crafted language could not counter the viral reality Crockett had already created. On social media, users dissected the statement, comparing it line by line to Crockett's airtight rebuttals. Each word, each claim was met with scrutiny, often highlighting how her narrative had set the terms of the discussion. Crockett, meanwhile, remained composed. She held no press conference, made no grand statements, yet her presence was everywhere. Analysts noted how the restraint itself was a strategic move, letting the public, the media, and Kennedy's team digest her performance without adding fuel to unnecessary confrontations. Her team coordinated quietly, ensuring that evidence, affidavits, and documented facts remained at the center of the story. By refusing to be reactive, Crockett maintained control, letting her brilliance speak louder than any political counterattack could. Across campuses and law schools, the confrontation became a case study in modern advocacy. Students and professors examined her combination of preparation, legal strategy, and human-centered storytelling. She had demonstrated that success in high-stakes legal and political scenarios required not only knowledge of the law, but also an understanding of public perception, empathy, and narrative control. Within hours of her live performance, blogs, podcasts, and news features dissected every moment, praising her methodical approach and composure under pressure. Political observers recognized the long-term implications. Crockett's ability to defend herself against a multi-million-dollar lawsuit while commanding public attention positioned her as a rising force. She had turned what could have been a career-threatening moment into an unprecedented display of leadership. Democratic allies quietly strategized on ways to leverage her visibility and credibility, while even some conservative commentators conceded her remarkable performance, noting that it had reshaped public expectations for accountability and transparency. In the days that followed, grassroots supporters mobilized. Calls, emails, and social media posts poured into her office, praising her courage, meticulous preparation, and defense of truth. Donations to causes she championed, particularly civic engagement and voting rights, surged. Ordinary Americans, inspired by the story of citizens like Mrs. Linda Harrison, saw in Crockett a symbol of advocacy grounded in both principle and human empathy. The moment had transcended politics. It had become a cultural touchstone. By the end of the first week, Kennedy's legal team realized that further escalation was untenable. Crockett had already framed the conversation on her terms, creating a narrative of accountability and courage that no legal maneuver could undo. Quietly, discussions shifted toward resolution. The senator's office began exploring ways to withdraw or settle the lawsuit in a manner that would minimize further damage. But by then, the public's attention and sentiment were firmly aligned with Crockett. The climax of the confrontation was clear. Jasmine Crockett had not only survived an $80 million lawsuit, she had mastered the art of narrative, preparation, and emotional resonance. The story became a defining moment in her career, illustrating the power of combining legal expertise with strategic communication and human-centered advocacy. Across the nation, the lesson was evident. Intellect, courage, and preparation could turn even the most high-stakes threats into triumphs. In the aftermath, Crockett returned to her work quietly, yet her presence loomed large. Every subsequent interaction, every speech, every public appearance carried the weight of her performance, a reminder that preparedness, poise, and a deep understanding of human impact could change not only a single confrontation, but the national conversation. What had started as a lawsuit intended to intimidate had become a story of resilience, intelligence, and leadership that would be studied, shared, and remembered for years to come.